I always thought birthdays were supposed to be filled with joy, laughter, maybe even a little bit of cake smashed in your face. But on my 18th birthday, I didn't just blow out candles. I blew out the last bit of trust one had in the people I once called my parents. It all began on a quiet evening. There were no balloons, no guests, no celebrations. Just the three of us sitting at the dining table. I was excited, though, because turning 18 felt like stepping into adulthood. I thought they had a surprise waiting for me. Maybe a gift, or some heartfelt words. Instead, my father cleared his throat. His eyes, usually distant, were sharp that night. My mother kept her gaze down, almost as if she couldn't bear to look at me. Then, with no warning, he said, "It's time you know the truth. We only adopted you for money." Those words sliced through me like glass. I laughed nervously at first. Adopted? Money? Surely he was joking. But the room was silent. My mother's lips trembled. My father's eyes were cold, unflinching. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. Adopted? Used? My entire world, my childhood, my family, suddenly felt like a lie. I remembered being a little kid, always craving their attention. Birthdays had always been empty. While my friends had parties and gifts, I usually got something practical, a school bag, a pair of shoes. Not that I minded much, but there was no warmth behind those gifts. No love. Then there were the strange conversations I'd overheard. Late at night, hushed voices behind closed doors. Words like allowance, compensation, agreement. At the time, I was too young to understand. But now, every whisper echoed back with new meaning. Even my friends used to notice. "Why do your parents never come to school events?" they'd ask. I'd shrug, forcing a smile. "They're busy." But deep down, I always wondered why it felt like I was more of a responsibility than a child. I stared at them, waiting for an explanation. My voice cracked as I whispered, What do you mean? You only adopted me for money." My father leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Exactly that. We never wanted children. But there was an arrangement. We got compensated to take you in. That's the truth." My mother finally spoke, tears pooling in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be this way. We were promised a better life. We thought we could give you one too. But," her voice broke, couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I pushed away from the table. My chair screeched against the floor. Everything inside me screamed. So, all those years, every birthday, every smile, every hug, it was fake. My father didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was confirmation enough. I stumbled into my room, slamming the door behind me. My chest heaved. My reflection in the mirror looked foreign, like I was staring at a stranger. Adopted, used, bought. Those words hammered in my skull. Tears blurred my vision as memories rushed back. Scraped knees they never kissed better. School plays they never attended. Nights I cried myself to sleep because they didn't say goodnight. I thought it was normal. I thought maybe they just weren't affectionate people. But now I realized it wasn't me. It was never me. It was them. They didn't care. They never had. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. My birthday night was shattered into pieces I couldn't glue back together. Then knock, knock, knock. I froze. Who could it be? My parents were in the living room, silent like ghosts. I wiped my face and opened the door. Standing there was a tall man in a dark suit, holding a briefcase. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom, not in our shabby hallway. "Are you MC's name?" he asked. I nodded cautiously. He handed me a sealed envelope, heavy with something more than paper. His eyes softened. "This is from your father." Confused, I replied, "My father's in the living room." The man shook his head slowly. "No, your real father." My stomach dropped. The world tilted again. Before I could even process, he added, "And you might want to sit down before you open it." That night, my life split into two halves, before the letter and after the letter. What I was about to discover would not only confirm the betrayal I just faced, but it would also uncover a legacy I never imagined possible. But before I opened that envelope, I couldn't stop thinking about one question that clawed at me. Who was my real father? And why had he waited until now to reach out? The envelope sat in my hands, heavier than anything I had ever held, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces. My fingers shook as I traced the edge of the seal. My so-called parents hovered in the background, their faces pale. My mother looked like she was about to faint. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with something between fear and rage. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the man who had delivered it. He stood tall and calm, almost like he'd rehearsed this moment. His voice was steady when he spoke again. "Inside this envelope," he said, "are documents left behind by your biological father. He instructed that you receive them on your 18th birthday, and only then." "Why me? Why now?" I managed to whisper. The man paused before answering. "Because today you are of age, and because today, his final wishes become yours to claim." I swallowed hard and tore open the envelope. Inside, there were neatly folded papers, a handwritten letter on thick stationery, and a small key taped to the corner. My hands shook as I pulled out the letter first. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and firm, the kind that belonged to someone with confidence, someone who had lived fully. I began to read aloud, my voice trembling. "My child, if you are reading this, it means you have turned 18. It also means I am no longer here to see the person you've become. Life, in its cruel twists, kept me from raising you myself, but never a day passed when you weren't in my thoughts. I arranged for you to be cared for, but I fear that those entrusted may not have given you the love you deserve. For that, I am sorry. Today, I leave you not just with questions, but with answers. Enclosed, you will find documents declaring your inheritance. My estate, my businesses, my assets, everything I built in my lifetime now belongs to you. The total value, as of the day this was prepared, is $91 million. Use it wisely. Live a life of truth, strength, and kindness. Remember, wealth can change everything around you, but never let it change who you are. With love, your father." The letter slipped from my hands. $91 million. I read it again, thinking maybe I had misread. But the number stared back at me. My parents, no, not my parents, froze. My father's eyes widened in shock, greed flickering like fire. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. The man in the suit cleared his throat. "There's more. The documents here detail the estate, properties, businesses, accounts. You will also find instructions for a meeting at our office tomorrow morning. We'll explain everything." I sat there, numb. A million thoughts collided in my head. $91 million. A father I never knew. A life I never imagined. And the betrayal of the people who raised me only to use me. When the man left, the silence in the room was deafening. My so-called parents looked at me like vultures circling prey. My father broke the silence. "That money, it should be ours. We raised you. We deserve a share." His words made my blood boil. "You raised me? You used me. You lied to me my whole life. You don't deserve a penny." My mother tried a softer approach. She placed a hand on my arm, her voice trembling. "Please, you don't understand. We struggled. We sacrificed. We pulled away." "Sacrificed? You admitted you never wanted me. You admitted it was all for money. Now you want more? How much greed do you two have?" Their silence was answer enough. That night I barely slept. The envelope and its contents lay on my desk, glowing under the dim lamp like a treasure chest. The key taped to the letter kept catching my eye. What did it unlock? A safe? A house? A secret vault? My mind spun in circles. By morning, I made up my mind. I was going to the lawyer's office with or without them. When I arrived, the same man greeted me warmly. He introduced himself as Mr. Hayes, the executor of my father's estate. His office was lined with books and framed certificates. Everything smelled of polished wood and seriousness. "First," he said, "let me officially welcome you. You are now the legal heir to your father's estate. These are the documents transferring everything into your name." He slid a thick stack of papers across the desk. I flipped through them, seeing numbers and assets that didn't feel real. Luxury properties, international accounts, shares in companies I had only ever seen on the news. It was overwhelming. Then Mr. Hayes pulled out a smaller envelope. "And this," he said, "explains the key you received." I tore it open. Inside was a card with an address. My father's villa. The room spun again. A real house. My father's house. His world. His life. And now mine. But before I could even imagine what it looked like, Mr. Hayes leaned forward. His tone grew serious. "There is something else you should know. Your father made arrangements in case anyone tried to interfere with your inheritance. I am legally bound to protect you from outside pressure. Be careful who you trust." I knew exactly what he meant. My so-called parents. When I returned home, they were waiting like predators. My father paced the living room, his face red with frustration. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. "Well?" my father demanded. "What did he leave you? How much?" I stared at them, holding the truth in my chest like fire. "Enough. Enough to never need you again." His fists clenched. "You ungrateful brat. We took you in when no one else wanted you. You owe us." I shouted back, years of pain exploding from me. "I owe you nothing. You never loved me. You used me. And now, I finally know who I really am." For the first time, my father's mask cracked. His eyes burned with a greed so raw it terrified me. My mother whispered through tears, "Please, don't leave us behind." But I already had. In that moment, I knew I could never see them the same way again. That night, I packed a small bag. Tomorrow, I would go to the villa. Tomorrow, I would step into the world my real father had left me. But deep inside, fear gnawed at me. What if the inheritance brought nothing but more problems? What if money changed me, too? As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I realized one thing. My life would never be normal again. The secret was out. The fortune was mine. And the true test of who I was had only just begun. The next morning, the sun barely peeked over the horizon when I found myself standing in front of tall iron gates. Beyond them stretched a driveway lined with ancient oak trees, their branches arching overhead like guardians of the past. At the end of the path stood the villa, my real father's villa. It was enormous, elegant, and intimidating all at once. White walls glowed in the morning light, tall windows gleamed, and ivy crawled along the stone in graceful patterns. It looked like something out of a dream, or maybe a movie. And now it belonged to me. The key in my hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I pushed it into the lock, turned, and slowly stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of leather and old books. Sunlight poured through the windows, landing on a grand staircase that spiraled upward. Portraits lined the walls. Faces I didn't recognize but felt strangely connected to. Ancestors, perhaps. Family. My family. For hours, I wandered through the villa in awe. There was a library larger than my entire old house. A study with shelves stacked high with ledgers and journals. Rooms filled with art, sculptures, and antiques that probably cost more than anything I'd ever seen. But what caught my attention most was a room tucked away at the end of a long hall. The door creaked as I opened it. Inside, on a wooden desk, sat a stack of journals bound in leather. The first one had a note attached. "For my child, when the time is right." I sat down, my hands trembling, and opened the first journal. His words spilled out like a voice from the grave. He wrote about his business ventures, his successes, his struggles. But woven through those stories was a constant thread, me. He described the day I was born, the way he had held me, the way my tiny hand had curled around his finger. His writing grew emotional when he explained why he had given me up. There had been enemies, threats, circumstances too dangerous to risk raising me himself. He thought he was protecting me. And yet, every page screamed regret. He missed my first steps, my first words, my first day of school. He wasn't there, but he thought of me every single day. Tears streamed down my face as I read. For the first time, I felt a bond stronger than blood. This man, though absent, had loved me in a way my adoptive parents never did. I spent hours reading, flipping through journals that painted a picture of who he was. Not just a wealthy man, but a man of honor, vision, and love. As the sun began to set, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. My heart sank. I knew that sound. I rushed to the window. A familiar car pulled up outside the gates. My so-called parents stepped out, their faces filled with determination and greed. I didn't want to let them in, but they banged on the doors, shouting my name. Against my better judgment, I opened it a crack. My father pushed past me immediately, his eyes scanning the villa like a thief casing a target. "So this is it," he sneered. "This is what he left you." My mother followed quietly, her face torn between awe and shame. "This should be ours," my father snapped. "We raised you. We deserve a share. You can't just cut us out." I clenched my fists. "You raised me for money. You never loved me. And now you want more? No, this is mine. This is what my real father wanted for me." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You think you're better than us now? With your millions? You're nothing without us." Something inside me snapped. For years, I had swallowed their coldness, their indifference, their lies. But not anymore. "I am nothing like you," I said firmly. "And I never will be." For the first time, he looked shaken. My mother grabbed his arm, whispering, "Please, let's go." But he yanked away, his greed burning brighter than his pride. "This isn't over," he growled before storming out. My mother gave me one last sorrowful look, then followed him into the night. I stood there in the silence of the grand hall, my heart pounding. Maybe they would try again. Maybe they'd fight for the money in court. But no matter what, I knew one thing. They could never take away the truth. They could never take away who I really was. Days turned into weeks as I settled into the villa. I read every journal, learning from my father's wisdom. I met with Mr. Hayes regularly, who guided me through managing the estate. It was overwhelming but empowering. And slowly, the pain began to turn into strength. I realized something important. Money didn't solve problems, it revealed them. It showed me who truly cared, and who only wanted to use me. My adoptive parents had revealed themselves for who they were. But my real father, though gone, had left me something priceless. Not just wealth, but a legacy of love and lessons. In the months that followed, I made choices that surprised even me. I donated to charities my father had once supported. I used part of the inheritance to set up scholarships for kids who grew up feeling unloved, like I once had. I began building a future not just for myself, but for others. And every night, as I walked through the villa, I felt closer to the man who had left it all behind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky burned orange, I stood on the balcony and whispered into the fading light, "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for thinking of me even when you couldn't be here. I promise I'll make you proud." For the first time in my life, I felt free. Not because of the $91 million. Not because of the mansion or the cars or the wealth. But because I finally understood the truth. Family isn't who raises you for money. Family isn't who pretends to love you for gain. Family is who thinks of you when no one else does. Who loves you even from afar. That night I slept peacefully. The ghosts of betrayal no longer haunted me. The future was mine to shape. And I knew one thing for certain. Money might change the world around you, but it's truth, love, and strength that change the world inside you. And that was the real inheritance my father left me.